Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Alex.
Yes, good morning. Well, we met last year in a hybrid version in Brussels. You were very kind to attend for us. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you with a simple question. What does the transition mean for Europe, and what is the role you see for the European Union in the context of this transition? I have a few questions for you afterwards.
Thank you very much, Alex. And once again, good morning to everyone, to all participants. And you're absolutely right. When I checked my calendar, we've met almost exactly a year ago at the Brussels airport. At that time, we already had the feeling that the life we are living is extremely unusual. It was well before 24th of February. And therefore, I'm sure all would agree that now we have even more challenges than just the post-COVID Europe and the crisis which was triggered by this really highly unusual event. And therefore, it's indeed a pleasure for me to once again be with you at the FERMA's European Risk Forum opening and to discuss with you what we can do better together, how we can work in this new highly volatile world, how to combine the strategic foresight which we conduct in the European Commission with your role as risk managers of Europe. And I think that exactly the reason for this cooperation is this increased uncertainty in the world. And I think we both are actually doing the same thing. We are trying to identify the risks and prepare in the best way we can for the next shock or crisis headed our way. And indeed, for me, this is the essence of the true risk leadership. At the Commission, and as I announced to you last year, I now lead the regular horizon scanning exercise. I mean, this gives me the possibility to warn the rest of the College of Commissioners on a quarterly basis about the new trends that our experts across the European institutions see over the horizon. And I am now more convinced than any time before that we need this risk leadership model because we are living through the most transformational period in Europe since the Second World War. First, last year, we discussed the COVID, the aftermath, the shocks and consequences. And I'm sure we would agree that COVID-19 disrupted our lives and triggered the largest global economic crisis in more the century, when we had to deal with closed borders, with disrupted supply lines, with this huge uncertainty which was linked with the unknowns of this pandemic. Now, of course, we are in totally new world when the war made it back again to European continent, something which a year ago nobody in Europe would believe. And we have to look at the war in Ukraine not just as a conflict between the two states, but as a direct attack of Russia on our democracy, our values, and our European way of life. And it has led to higher energy and food prices. It put even stronger pressure on public finances in the context of high inflation rates. So we can say that it was a kind of new, unwelcome, but real accelerator of key megatrends like climate change, environmental challenges. Let's just think on a minute on the Nord Stream pipeline being burst and all the damage which is created by bombing the infrastructure in Ukraine. But we see the attack on our digital and technological infrastructure, which of course put the strains on the needed transformation. But I would say even more importantly, the pressure on democracies and values. When we met the last time, I was telling you that we are not in a good place right now because more than half of the mankind now lives under the regimes which cannot be described as democratic. They are totally authoritarian, or undemocratic or with these negative features. And then, of course, we see that shifts in global order and demography are accelerating as well. One of the consequences, which is now, I would say, even more amplified in our risk assessment for the future, is the lessons learned from the disrupted supply chains and the access to critical raw materials. Once we have seen, as I was just referring a minute ago, that borders could be closed, the ships would not sail, planes would not fly, the trains would be blocked at borders, we clearly discovered that in Europe, we have to deal much better with our resilience and to make sure that we would have all critical raw materials and products we need for our people and for our economy. So in 2021, we did a very thorough updating of our new industrial strategy. We screened more than 6,000 of products which we all import and manufacture in Europe, and we discovered that 130 of them are indeed in very sensitive ecosystems upon which the EU is highly dependent. Most of these 130 products, I'm sure you would not be surprised, are closely linked with the supply of critical raw materials, which are absolutely crucial for green and digital transition. And yet, if you look at it objectively, the EU's dependence on import of these raw materials from third countries like China is today bigger or greater than our dependence on Russia for fossil fuels ever been. And it was still before the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. We just had to comprehend and we had to explain to the leaders across Europe that without proper access to the critical raw materials, there will be no green and digital transition, because we just simply need these critical raw materials for photovoltaic panels, for batteries, for windmills, for computers, for aerospace industry. And therefore, we have to have totally new attitude and approach, making sure that we would have adequate access to the critical raw materials. Just to give you one figure as a takeaway, if you look at the demand of lithium, we would need 3,500% increase of supply of lithium, which is key component for electric mobility, already by 2030. So that's the size of the challenge. And therefore, our strategic foresight, which we prepared for this year, focused on twinning between green and digital transition. What can we do better? How can we merge and marry these two revolutions and transitions with bigger efficiency and efficacy? We just simply need to have greener data centers, greener ICT, and we also have to be honest with each other that we know how to get to our climate goals to 2030. But if we want to become climate neutral continent by 2050, we just simply would need new technologies. Many of them we have, but on prototype stage, and many of them we do not have yet. So, I mean, it would require enormous effort and support for our industry to get us to the technological stage where we can really achieve the climate neutral status by 2050. Of course, if you look at the lessons learned from Russia's aggression against Ukraine, just accelerated and strengthened our need for more resilience and for much stronger open strategic autonomy. I think that what we are living through right now is indeed galvanized the transformation of our supply chains, adding pressure to move to less vulnerable, more diversified and reliable ones. And this includes working with like-minded partners to diversify our sources of critical raw materials, but as you have seen, also the supply of energy, because this is now #1 topic discussed of every political level in the European Union. Coming back for the last time to critical raw materials, we are preparing new legal framework, Act on Critical Raw Materials, where we want to focus on what Europe is very strong at, and this is refining. But we know this is recycling. But we know that until we get to the recycling, we need to improve our modern, sustainable mining practices. We have to be much better in refining the raw materials we have in Europe, and we have to make sure that we have proper supplies of the critical raw materials, which we do not have in Europe from our allies, partners, and from the third countries. And we simply are observing very closely how South Korea, US, and Japan is proceeding in this matter by stockpiling, by very precise inventories and strategic planning well ahead of time. So coming back to your role, because I think that your role in future years would be absolutely crucial, because it would really require absolutely new approach of all of us, but especially of you, because I see you as a risk managers and insurers who would play a key role both as institutional investors, but also as suppliers of risk coverage. So you, in a kind, underpin the risk leadership that we need to reinforce Europeans' resilience and our open strategic autonomy. For instance, with the very real risk of recession looming, EU businesses increasingly depend on financing from insurers to support the recovery and transition. As you would recall, before the war has started, our assessment how much money we would need to get us to our 2030 goals in our green and digital transition. We've been talking about 650 billion euros per year in public and private investment to achieve our green and digital goals. You can imagine that now this figure would be even more dramatic, and that needs for investments would be much higher. That is why in our Solvency II review, we are working on facilitating long-term equity investment by insurers, and I know that you are following this process very closely. So we know that we are already in the co-legislative stage, where the European Parliament is discussing our proposals with the representatives of our member states. We have also put stronger emphasis on the management of climate and other sustainability risks in the prudential rules for the insurance sector. Insurers are being asked to consider sustainability risks in the governance, risk management systems, and investment decision. It means identifying any exposure to the climate change risks as part of their own risk. And this is crucial, as a climate change adaptation and mitigation in the context of our transition to the carbon neutral economy will pose a massive challenge for risk managers. Here, even a small increase in insurance coverage can significantly reduce the economic costs of climate-related disasters for businesses, taxpayers, and governments. And this is very important to explain, and this is very important to present to key decision makers. That is why last year we launched a strategy for financing the transition to a sustainable economy, which aims to support companies and risk managers in making our societies and organizations more sustainable. A key building block of the strategy is the development of the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities, as well as sustainable financial products like the green bonds. These solutions will be key in scaling up financing of private and public investment for the low carbon transition, And I know that Commissioner Murray McGuinness is in close contact with you and with the financial industry in this particular area. In addition, the Commission will initiate the climate resilience dialogue between insurers, reinsurers, public authorities, and other stakeholders. The goal is to exchange best practices and identify ways to address the climate protection gap, which currently still represents 70% of climate-related losses in the EU through recommendations and voluntary commitments. Foresight will play an important role here to enhance economic and financial resilience, and the Commission will integrate sustainability risk into risk management system and the supervision insurers, including by proposing the introduction of the climate change scenario analysis. Something similar, for your information, is happening with the EU civil protection mechanism, which has been at the forefront of our efforts to provide aid to the Ukrainian people, but also to help our member states to find the numerous floods, fires, natural disasters throughout the last years, be it in the summer, in the spring, in the autumn, or in the winter. By the end of this year, we will therefore put together disaster resilience goals to better anticipate and prepare for these large-scale and cross-border disaster risks. They will be underpinned by a union-wide, cross-sectoral and cross-border disasters developed by our joint research center. They will cover 16 areas of concerns around civil protection and emergency response, such as heat waves, wildfires, floods, pandemics, but as well as nuclear, industrial, and cybersecurity incidents. The goal is to make the EU and its member states better prepared to tackle large-scale, multi-sectoral, cross-border disasters that will be occurring more and more frequently within and outside the Union. Finally, let me stress that there's a key institutional investors, risk managers, and insurers are well placed to directly finance sustainable investments and offer products that help build up buffers for households exposed to shocks. In this way, you can contribute to the third transition that is at the core of the Commission objectives, meaning after green and digital, we also need socially fair transition for our people. And I think that our social fabric would be tested a lot in the coming winter, the coming 2 years, until we find a way how to tame the high inflation and the high energy prices. Therefore, for us to underpin social cohesion during these uncertain times is one of the highest priorities. I believe that the social dimension will play an ever bigger role in any future investment decisions as well. In this context, a sustainable finance research forum will be launched on the 27th of October to strengthen the role of science and encourage knowledge sharing between the industry and research community. It will raise awareness on the use of sustainable finance and guide investors on how to unleash the potential of sustainability of data. I'm convinced that by working hand in hand with the private sector, we can not only answer the challenges of today, but also equip ourselves to build a better tomorrow. And this is in the essence and ultimately what risk leadership in a fast changing world should be about. Thank you very much.